Alright, it's time for another Q&A video. We haven't done one of these in a long time, so it's well overdue. As always, these questions are very intelligent and thought out, and I can't wait to get into them. So let's get right into them. Number one. This is from Ibnez24 on Discord. Now I know you better as Jim, and you are a premium VIP club member, so your question gets answered first. And thanks very much for your support. And for the question, of course. And you ask, who does the keyboards for your album? They're world class. Well, thanks very much for the compliment. I'm quite surprised to hear you say that because I do the keyboard solos for my second album myself. And this is despite not being able to play keyboards. I'm not a keyboard player. I play guitar and that's it. And I struggle enough with that as it is. Now, the way that I create my keyboard solos is obviously not by playing the keyboard because I can't do that. I drop the notes in, one at a time, onto a MIDI timeline with loop brackets around it. And I just keep doing this. I keep dropping the notes in and moving them up and down and side to side until I create a keyboard solo that kind of sounds like what you'd hear in progressive rock and progressive metal. So that's how I do that. So yeah, and I just keep moving around until it sounds good. So I'm glad you think they sound good. World class, that is quite a compliment. Quite a compliment, thank you. Okay, question number 2. Vic Wick Gal, this is another Discord question. And Vic Wick Gal, I know you better as Vicky. You're a VIP club member as well. Thank you for being a supporter. And you ask, I have seen multiple techniques for doing vibrato. The thumb around the neck method, for example. Which one do you use, and which do you recommend that produces a nice sound? Well, I know of three methods for producing vibrato. Let's take a look. So there's classical vibrato, which is, well, it's typical for fretless stringed instruments like violins and so on. And this is where you just wiggle your finger, you just kind of shake it laterally like this to create vibrato. I don't know if you can hear it, I'm not plugged in right now, but there is a little bit of vibrato going on there. Now, the thumb over the neck one, which you mentioned, that is, of course, the most common. And that's done by hoisting the thumb up over the top like this, and then doing it like miniature bends and releases to create the modulation. I'm not very good at that one, and there are limitations to it as well. Because you're doing push bends to create that vibrato, if you do it on the low E, you just come off the fretboard. So the vibrato technique that I like using, and that I'm probably best at, is pull vibrato. This is where you don't need the thumb over the top, you can just have it in the middle of the back of the neck, and you pull. So pull to bend, and then release. Now again, conversely, you can't do pull bends like on the top frets. So not the top frets, on the high E string, because you'll come off the fretboard. So when it comes to practically using vibrato, you obviously can't use the push style on the low E, and you can't use the pull style on the high E. So you have to use a blend, a mix of the two. So typically what I do is pull vibrato on like on these 4 strings, so the E, A, D, and G, and then I do push vibrato on the 2 top strings. That's how I work around it. That's my strategy. So thanks for that question, Vicky. All right, number 3. SuperKen67. This is another Discord question. I had to summarize this one because it was a little long. You've got a lot on your mind, and I like that, and I appreciate that. This is what you asked. When you play in the different modes, are you thinking about them as a full scale that's independent of any other mode or scale, or are you just thinking about them as the major scale of another root note? So, to answer this, when I'm playing, I'll give you an example. If I'm playing in D Mixolydian, so I'm playing over a jam track, or I'm playing very obviously in the key of D Mixolydian, I can quite happily just sit in the relative key, like E minor, which is just one position along, and I can just noodle through the E minor scale, and I'll know because the E minor scale is the relative key of D Mixolydian that I'm going to be in key. So I'm not too fussed about that. You know, I could play in C Lydian as well. Like it would sound D Mixolydian if that's what the intended accompaniment is trying to accomplish. However, when I'm playing in a particular mode, I use different licks. So if I were in D Mixolydian, like I said, I probably wouldn't start playing rock licks in E minor. Now, yes, the notes would be in key, but the way that the notes land wouldn't be appropriate. They wouldn't have the same effect as if I were to play in the key of E minor, right? So what I do is I learn specific licks in the Mixolydian mode that I reserve for when I'm playing in the Mixolydian mode. I hope that makes sense. I suppose I can summarize that again because I waffled on a bit there. Right, so when I'm just noodling around, I can use the relative keys, different positions. That doesn't matter too much to me. But if I want to really convey a mode's feeling, I learn licks for that mode. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. I really do. Question number 4. This is Jared Johnson. You ask, what are the first 5 techniques you recommend learning for someone who wants to play metal? More specifically, in what order, so that each one builds off the previous? Well, I mean, so first 5 techniques I would recommend for someone learning metal. Okay, I'll give 5. I wrote down 5 here. I would say you should probably start off with some down picking. So all downstrokes, just to establish a metal rhythm. You need to be able to do that. So, you know down picking, don't you? It's just like semicircle movements where you play and then you pitch up, you come back, do it again. That'll be really useful for someone early on, a beginner wanting to get into metal. And then the next thing they want to do, so technique number 2, would be power chords. And that builds off the previous, right? Because you can go between doing down-picked stuff into power chords. That's a great foundation for basic metal playing because power chords are all over the place in metal. Then I think what you'd want to do is establish a fast and reliable single string tremolo. So picking one note on one string over and over again as fast as you can. And there are going to be 3 ways that you do this automatically, and it's up to you to find out which works for you. There is side-to-side wrist yawing, which is the one that I recommend. There's forearm rotation, like Yngwie Malmsteen uses, or even better, Chris Brooks. It's a great way of producing a tremolo, no doubt about it. Or there's the third way, which is to just lock the wrist and spasm at the elbow, which I don't think anyone in their right mind would ever recommend. But those are 3 ways of creating a tremolo, and I think that should be one of your focuses. One of the 5 techniques if you're wanting to get into metal, preparing yourself for metal playing. The 4th thing I'd say is repeating patterns. Now, not only because I just released an ebook, 40 repeating patterns, but because repeating patterns are just really useful in metal. So getting a bunch of those, getting them up to speed, burning them into your muscle memory, that's a great foundation for metal playing. And then the 5th and final technique, seeing as I'm limited to 5 here, it would be just basic scale runs. So minor scale runs, harmonic minor scale runs, the kind of things that you'd need for metal playing. So I'll summarize those 5 again. Yeah. 5 techniques that you'd recommend for someone starting out with metal. Down picking for riffing, power chords for riffing, basic single string tremolo to get you ready for high speed picking, repeating patterns just because they're really useful, and basic scale runs to get you ready to move all about the place for soloing. So I hope that answers your question. There would be many ways to do that, of course, but those are just 5 that came to mind for me. Right, the final question. Alitra, when improvising, how do you stop sounding scalar? Oh, this is a common one. Oh, and you know it. I know everyone's asking this question, and it's a very long topic. Yes, it is. But do you have tips you use when you improvise, just to sound more melodic and not so scalar? I try to target the chord tones when improvising, but for some reason, in between those notes, it's very, very repetitive and scalar. Well, I think we can all agree just how ridiculous it is that we spend so long learning scales and practicing scales, and then all of a sudden we're expected to have our playing not sound like scales. It's just, as I said, ridiculous, especially because we know, and you've probably heard me say this an awful lot, you are what you practice. So if you practice scales all the time, your playing is just going to be scalar. That's a fact. So yeah, how do we get away from playing sounding scalar? There are a few ways. First, I'd just like to say, well done on targeting the chord tones, trying to land on specific notes to make your playing mesh better with the backing track. That's I don't know if you came up with that independently, or if you came up with that through watching my video, How to Improvise Over Backing Tracks, or whatever it was called. I'll pop it up on the screen somewhere. But yeah, that's already a great thing that you're doing, by targeting notes to land on throughout the progression. Right, so how do we sound less scalar when we play? I hope this isn't too much of a cop-out, but in order to sound less scalar when you play, you need to not play scalar. I'm not winding you up. What you can do is limit yourself to doing other things that aren't scales, in particular. So you can say to yourself, okay, I'm going to play over a jam track for the next half hour, and I will not play scales. Instead, I will limit myself to licks, repeating patterns, and diagonal or horizontal position connectors. And that's all I'll do. And if you stick to that, your improvisation will sound not scalar, because it'll be full of licks and repeating patterns. That's one way you can get around it, by limiting yourself and just refusing to play scales. Right, there's another idea, the humming approach. Now, if you've got either of my ebooks, the Lead Guitarist Practical Guide to the Modes, or Lead Guitar Practice Methodology, you'll already be aware of my technique for breaking out of these scales, these scalar prisons that our fingers place us within. And it's called the humming approach. So this is basically where you put on a jam track, and without touching your guitar at all, you just put it to the side. You start to hum melodic ideas, so nice, pretty melodies and stuff. And by doing this, you're freeing yourself, as I said, from the scalar prison that your fingers create for you. You're now just thinking and feeling musically and melodically. So yeah, I came up with this years ago, and it really helped me. I would record myself humming. I'd actually do this. I'd record myself humming over a jam track. And then, if I liked what I'd hummed out, I'd pick up the guitar and find where those notes were, and then play it. And that was how I get a fresh melody that wasn't confined by scalar shapes. So you might want to try that. Now, this method isn't just outlined in those two ebooks that I mentioned. I've also created a free article on my website called Emotional Melodic Playing, I think that's what it's called. I'll link to that as well in the video description. So, that's all 5 questions. Thanks very much for sending them in. I had a great time reading through them and coming up with answers. I hope that the answers were good enough. I look forward to the next video of this. Now, before we wrap up, I'd just like to say a few things. There's been a fair bit of news here on my end. You may have realized that I haven't been as active as usual. That's because I'm recording the second to last track off my second album, Splendor of Sands. And it's a very stressful time for me, full of insomnia and stress and self-doubt. If you're a recording artist, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's some good to come from this. I've got a new t-shirt line, which I'll tell you about now. So yeah, I've got a new t-shirt line out. I've got one for my Argonaut album, like a classic black tee, a singlet, and then I've got this one, which is probably my favorite. So it's like a raglan vintage style, like 3/4 length sleeves, and it's just Alfred Potter Splinter of Sands, and it's got the curse sigil there, which you'll be familiar with if you've seen all the artwork related to my second album, Splinter of Sands. It's made in the USA, it's printed in the USA. The quality of it is just insane. It's a little pricey, as you'd expect, but not too pricey, and the quality, as I said, it's insane. It's gorgeous. I can never wear this, of course, because it's got my name on it. That would be really weird. That would be a little up myself, wouldn't it? It's nice to have a bit of memorabilia there for myself. Right, next bit of news. Finally, available to the public are my custom signature picks from Hawk Picks. So these are Tonebird 8s in 2mm thick, and they are available in off-white and flame red and black as well. These are just incredible. These are luxury items. So I use these when I'm recording and when I'm making videos, when I'm jamming. I still churn through crappy plastic picks every day when I'm just wearing them out with picking practice. But when it comes to performing and recording and such, I use these because they're gorgeous. Low friction material, very durable, and just aesthetically so gorgeous. Oh yeah, you might have heard that I've released a new ebook. So this is another in the 40 series, because we had 40 developmental alternate picking exercises and 40 scale sequences. And then we've got this one, new edition, 40 repeating patterns. So it's just 40 repeating patterns, different places, different scales. They're really useful, and you can download the audio for all of these as well. The link is within the ebook itself. And this is just the cheap 40 series. This ebook is only $5 US. It's a nice quick download. So if you want that, you want some excellent content to sink your teeth into right now, go and get that new ebook. It's available on the products page of my website. And finally, if you want to become a Patreon-style monthly supporter and help me out, you can join my VIP club. So this is essentially a way that you can support me and also have access to a private download website, which other people won't get. And I just keep it stocked absolutely full with exercises and etudes and licks, and full solos from my albums and album artwork and practice schedules, and it's full of stuff. So if you want extra content and if you want to support me Patreon style, yeah, please consider signing up to my VIP club. Well, I think that wraps up this Q&A video. I had a lot of fun, and I look forward to the next one. Well, I'd better get back to recording now, and you'd better get back to practice. So I'll see you next time.